Shukanta, I can see you, but where is Javed's video?
Hello.
Hello, yes.
Am I audible, Ramaji?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Wait.
Okay. So can I start?
Yes, please start.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us in this webinar. আপনাদের সকলকে আমার নমস্কার. It's a great opportunity to be speaking with all of you today. I, Mohammad Javed Hassan, on behalf of the Department of Philosophy, St. Anandram Jayapuriya College, Kolkata, welcome you all to this one-day webinar on combating viral threats to human existence, issues and concerns through the darkening glass of philosophy. We are very happy to announce that our participants in this webinar are from more than 50 colleges and universities, among which 90% and above are faculty members. So for sharing our thoughts in this platform is a great opportunity indeed. I feel privileged to introduce you with our Honorable Principal Sir, Dr. Ashok Mukhopadhyay. Now I would like to request our Principal Sir to address the participants and our distinguished invited speakers with his valuable inputs to this webinar. Please, over to Dr. Mukhopadhyay.
Am I audible? Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Is it okay? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hear you.
So I welcome all of you here in this webinar, and especially the distinguished educationists, the academicians, Professor Bala from University of Delhi, Namaskar, and Professor Mousumi Guha from Jadavpur University, Namaskar, madam. So the thing is, Professor Bala is from Delhi University. He is the HOD of the department and also the academic, the philosophical counselor by American philosophical practitioners, not from the particular subject, it is there. And the Professor Mousumi Guha from Jadavpur University. The thing is that we have already discussed on, participated in many webinars and discussions on issues related to this pandemic COVID-19. And today's your topic is combating the viral threats. I understand the desire for combating the threats. What I'm not sure understand that the darkened eyes of philosophy, and I'm not a student of philosophy too. I'll be curious. I think all will be excited to know your interpretation from your side. These are, I would like to see this particular webinar, this form of seminar from a different angle. The technological advances made it. The unprecedented lockdown throughout the world made it possible that people like you, professors like you, join this webinar in short notices. There was activities in our college that we wanted to express our grievances through write-ups, and our COVID grievance cell came out with a magazine, and that is why I had to look into the things a bit closely. In this time, when you will find the mandirs, the mosques, the churches, the gumfas, all were closed. I feel the belief system is being shattered over last 2-3 months. Should we compare with Nietzsche that God is dead? Madam, Professor Guha and the other faculties and sir, Nietzsche did not stop there. Nietzsche elaborated that our desire for knowing the world more, it is through scientific revolution. We have killed the God. I do not want to compare, but more you want to know, more you want to develop, you will go for the greed and the destruction of the habitat and the eventual consequences of the world that we see today. Sure of that, what is correct and what is wrong. But I felt that in the sanctum sanctorum of all gods, the voices of Nietzsche was echoed that God remains dead. It is not that I'll be quoting one more philosopher here because it is a seminar, webinar on philosophy, but it is pure economics, I feel. I've gone through the timeline of, very carefully, the timeline of this COVID pandemic, the role of who, and I found it is in black and white that they delayed in announcing this pandemic. In the process, the whistleblower of Wuhan was killed. I mean, he was infected. He was humiliated before died an untimely death. That is a different thing. But Chomsky in recent interviews, he gave 2 to 3 interviews recently. He's a leftist intellectual of America. Because of the opinion that it is the colossal failure of market economy. Because we knew after SARS in 2009 that we have to develop vaccine. The continuous development process and procedure of developing vaccine was not possible. This era of neoliberal economy, because we'll be more interested in body cream than vaccine. I would be repeating some of my thoughts which I already shared a week back. See, China in 2019 made a dramatic development in spacecraft. They landed in such a place hitherto unknown to the world, the dark side of the moon. It happened in 2019. And Wuhan failure happened in 2019. Sir, I would not like to elaborate on such things, but the things we learned from the boyhood days that you will be debating on Indian and Western philosophy, maybe, I'm not sure. But the time is not right for that. We ought to look for internationalism, because virus does not know border. Look at Cuba, a small country sending doctors to Italy and other countries. Look at Germany, they are having excess capacity of hospital beds and diagnostic capacities. I'm a petty person to criticize America, but the news comes that they're defunding who? They're funding more against Iran. I would like to respect the faculties here who have come and joined this webinar. I would also like to show respect to my father who died long back, because when Javed contacted me today morning, I thought it would be better to go through some books on philosophy. I found one of the best collections of my father's, a big book, a fat book of Schopenhauer. I did not enter into the thing. I'm not a subject, I'm not a student of philosophy, and I respect the academicians. But on the flip side, I was lucky to come up with a quotation on the back cover. And I would like to place this before you, sir. You are here to decide that on the back side of the book, Schopenhauer was on record without giving the contextual reference, I quote, "We shall leave this world as foolish and as wicked as we found it on our arrival." Sir, is it true? I'm a dedicated student. I would like to know, and I became very philosophical from the morning. So what will happen when I will not be there? Is there no development, sir? I think your webinar, your discussions will surely touch upon that, so that we'll be little bit encouraged. With this much, I thank the teachers of my department, Professor Javed, Professor Borua, and the faculty members, my compatriot friend from Commerce, Professor Pine, who came here, and Professor Guha and Professor Bala from the University of Delhi. Thank you very much. Thanks again. Javed, please take over.
Yes, sir. We are grateful to our principal, sir, for his valuable inputs regarding this webinar. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to introduce our moderator of this program, Professor Chandrima Paul. She is a faculty member of our department. Well, now I will turn the time over to the moderator of the webinar, Professor Paul. Please.
Thank you, Professor Harshan, for giving me an opportunity to host this webinar. Good afternoon, everyone. We all know that nowadays the whole world is going through a severe, dreadful situation. And under these circumstances, we, the Department of Philosophy of St. Anandram Jaipuria College, has arranged a one-day national seminar on the topic of combating viral threats to human existence, issues and concerns through the darkened glass of philosophy. Professor Harshan has already started our inaugural session, and now I would like to invite and request Dr. Radhanath Pine, coordinator of IQAC of our college, for his inaugural speech. Please, Dr. Pine, sir.
Am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir, yes. Please carry on, sir.
Okay. As you know, we have a very vibrant cell of IQAC in our college, and we have already conducted many webinars on this particular subject. But today is a special day, as we are going to take over one webinar on this subject basing on philosophy, and we expect to increase our epistemological base of this subject A lot of contradictions have already in the air. The order of priority has been questioned. Human life or economy, which comes first? The share of responsibility is diluted, where role of government or self-defense, which one is prerogative today? And above all, whether the phenomenon as natural or man-made, that is also a questionable issue. Some of these conflicts are to be resolved from the speaker, as well as some paper presenters are there. We welcome all of them, and we are eagerly waiting for their speech. And with this word, rather, I initiate this webinar and expecting a very huge success of the same. Thank you. Over to Chandrima.
Thank you very much, sir. And now I would like to request our HOD sir, Professor Surojit Borua, for giving an introduction of our respected invited speakers. Over to Professor Borua. Hello, Professor Borua.
Thank you, Professor Chandrima. Distinguished speakers, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Professor Chandrima.
Thank you.
Yeah. Distinguished speakers, our Principal Dr. Ashok Mukhopadhyay, sir, IQAC Convener Dr. Radhanayat Pan, sir, academicians, teachers, and researchers from several institutions joining us from all over India, colleagues, and my dear students. It is indeed a privilege and honor for all of us here at the Department of Philosophy to have you as participants in this webinar on combating viral threats to human existence, issues and concerns through the darkened lens of philosophy. Thank you for taking time out and being here today. Today we have amongst us two distinguished speakers who have. Our first speaker is Professor Bala Ganapati Devarakonda. He is professor and head in the Department of Philosophy at University of Delhi. His research interests include Indian philosophy, philosophy of religion, and social and political philosophy. In addition, Professor Bala is a certified philosophical counselor from American Philosophy Practitioners Association. He has numerous. Some of his recent books include Philosophical Doctrine of Andhakas, published this year by Springer, Revisiting Dan, a response to Eurocentric approaches, also published in the current year, Hinduism in Thailand, Its Presence and Absence, published in 2018, and Role of Guru as an Interpreter of Dharma, published in 2017. South Asia Press is coming up with a new edition of Leviathan of Thomas Hobbes, with a detailed introduction by Professor Bala. Presently, he is working on a project. Welcome, sir. We are delighted to have you here. Second is Professor Motumi, Philosophy, Jadavpur University. She earned her MPhil from University of Cambridge with a Cambridge Commonwealth Scholarship and is a PhD in philosophy from Jadavpur University. She has several publications in the domain of philosophy of mind and ethics. Some of the recent ones are Simulation and Meditation in Mind and Cognition, published in 2019, Reconstructing Folk Psychology, the Indian Perspective, Early Mind Reading, jointly with Deboshree Jana, in Tradition and Modernity, 2015. Welcome, Madam. We are glad to have you here. We have 4 other scholars from different institutions who have agreed. Professor Lori Bandhopadhyay, Assistant Professor, DNC College, Dr. Koel Kole from Shobharani Memorial College, and Sanjoita Sen, Research Scholar, Jadavpur University. We are honored to have you with us and look forward to an academically productive and engaging webinar. with active participation from all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you,
Over to
Professor.
Professor Antuna.
Thank you, Professor Borua, for informing the glorious profile of our honorable speakers. And now I am requesting our coordinator, sir, our convener, sir, Professor Javed Harshan, to present the theme of today's webinar. Over to Professor Harshan. Hello, Professor Harshan. Are you there?
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Professor Paul.
Thank
I shall start with a quote from Vajra. It is the most difficult thing in the world to see somebody you love loses their way, to watch sadness slowly darken a heart. You want to scream, to kill the heart, to pull them back up to the light. But it is hopeless. Depression is a void, and inside they cannot hear you. Yes, my dear friends, this is the situation we all are passing through for the last 3 months. By the phrase viral threats, I mean not only COVID-19 coronavirus, rather corona-type virus, in addition to social and political virus altogether. Nowadays, each and every moment we are living with the highest degree of fear of death or fear of losing our near and dear ones for all our surroundings. We are merely exist, but are we living at all? So now the question is, what is the meaning of life? Any kind of threats to human existence leads to existential crisis. Existential crises are the moments individuals question whether their lives have meaning, purpose, or values. And this is not uncommon. Rather, in this situation, it is very much common all over the world. An existential crisis can affect anyone at any age. At this moment, it is threatening the entire human society. So for the mankind, I think this is the high time to think about the issue and try to find out the possible resolution. Therefore, the theme we are going to discuss today in this one-day national webinar is fighting viral threats to human existence, issues and concerns through the darkened glass of philosophy. The discussion today probably focused on following two questions. How can philosophy help us during and post-pandemic existential crisis of human being? How do we interpret the existential crisis? Will this pandemic wipe out human existence? What is the nature of human life? What is the future of human life? How to handle a pandemic and try to find out probable means of resolution. Can we learn anything from the past experiences of pandemic that might help us in dealing with viral threats? Can any ism in Indian philosophy or continental philosophy or post-modern philosophy throw a light on these crucial questions? The discuss probably covers different aspects of the fundamentals of human nature. Those are ethical, social, political, psychological, environmental, educational, religious, cultural, etc. So friends, we shall look up to our honorable speakers in this regard and hope we do get some way out from this crisis indeed. Thank you. Over to Professor Paul.
Thank you, Professor Prashant, for giving a clear idea of today's webinar. And now we will start our technical session. And we are very happy to announce that we have two respected speakers with us, Professor Bala Ganapati Devarakonda, Head of the Department of Philosophy of Delhi University, and Professor Moushumi Guha, Department of Philosophy of Jadavpur University. And all the participants are requested to put your questions in the chat box. If you have to, if you want to ask any questions to our dignitary speakers, and now I'd like to request our first honorable speaker, Dr. Bala Ganapati Devarakonda, for delivering his speech. Please, sir.
I request the host to please mute the other people, otherwise we can hear some disturbance.
Yeah, good afternoon. May I request everybody to mute their mics so that there won't be any disturbance? Yeah, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity that all of you have given me. Specifically, Dr. Javed Hassan, who was very kind enough to invite me for this webinar, and Ashok Mukhopadhyay, principal of the college, and my co-speaker, Dr. Moushumi Guha from Jadavpur University, and head of the Department of Philosophy in the college, Dr. Sujit Barwaji, and Radhanathji, who has wonderfully made his opening remarks. Before I begin anything, I have to respond to the first speaker, Dr. Ashok Mukhopadhyay. Wonderfully, he has opened the platform where we can go further and try to discuss and try to understand things in a better way. He has prepared the platform for us. Even when I was looking at the title of the theme, title of the conference webinar that is proposed, when I was looking at it, even I thought, why is it that it is said darkened glass of philosophy? Why should we think that it is a darkened glass? Or even if you are looking at this crisis, why would philosophy become a darkened glass? In fact, it would probably become a bright and white glass, which would have or help us in understanding the crisis in a better way, right? Because even if we consider present situation to be a crisis, deep crisis, whatever, then we have to assume as philosophers and philosophy students that there probably are some set of solutions that philosophical discourses can bring out, at least to understand the present situation in a better way. So that's where even I was also concerned about the title, especially this darkened glass of philosophy. But I don't think I would go with death of the god or something of that sort, right? Because there are certain things which human beings do, and finally they try to blame either God or nature or something else. So that's where we have to be very cautious in jumping to such kind of a conclusion. And yeah, these are actually the remarks that he has made are very thought-provoking. And thank you so much, Ashok Mukhopadhyay, for those wonderful opening remarks. And our friend Professor Javed has made very interesting. He raised very interesting questions like, "Are we living? If at all we say that we are living, are we living? And what is the meaning of life? And what would be the future of life?" right? These are the things which are very. Yeah, I hope everybody can mute their. I, I request everybody to mute their mics so that there won't be any disturbance. What would be the future of life? These are very pertinent questions, and all of us have to address. Especially philosophers are the ones who have to address these questions and try to respond. And thank you so much for the previous speakers for pointing out these very valuable thoughts that we should discuss at this juncture. Uh, yeah, but I decided to talk about something related to this, but slightly different from what we have been discussing so far. My theme that I have chosen for this talk is normal to new normal, paradigm shifts in self-perception. This is what I thought I would talk about. Okay. What do I mean by this? We already started talking. Many people, many scholars have started talking about new normal that we have to confront with after some time after the lockdown closes. So, what would be this new normal? Is a rich area of discourse that the um, present humanity or intellectuals are confronting with and trying to understand. That's where I place myself, and I would see certain kinds of paradigm shifts in from normal to new normal that we have to take into cognizance with regard to our living and life on the world, life in the world. So, but there is one important aspect. There are many aspects related to this normal to new normal that I can talk about. But for this particular purpose, for this talk, I have chosen something very specific, which is self-perception. Okay, how were we looking at ourselves sometime back, now, and probably in the new normal that we are thinking of reaching out? Okay, so how would self-perception be there in the normal and in the present situation and in the future? Okay, in the new normal. So this is what I am trying to understand, and this is my concern for today's talk. In the process, I would be also touching aspects like existence, human existence, and meaning of life, and also I would touch upon certain issues related to human nature, because human nature, as it was envisaged sometime back, okay, and as it is now in the transition period, and as it would be in future in the new normal, may be completely different in these three different phases, which is to be understood in a proper way. So let me begin by trying to understand what is this new normal. Okay, if I have to say something about new normal, when do you talk about new normal? Usually we talk about new normal when we think that it assumes that there was something called normal, and there is something that has happened to this normal, and that is how we are trying to enter into this new normal that we are referring to. So let me say, what is this normal that we are talking about? Okay, at least in India, factually, if you go by temporally and spatially, what is the normal for us? Probably the normal life that we had was before January 2020. The life that we had before 2020, January 2020, was a normal life that we are referring to, at least in India, because in China it could be something else. Okay, it may be few months earlier than that, but in India, definitely it begins. It ends with January 2020. So if that is the normal that we are referring to, we are presently in the process, okay, transition process, and the third phase that we are referring to is new normal, which we are trying to reach out to, which we are trying to conceptualize and understand, so that we can prepare ourselves and deal with ourselves in a better way. So if that is the case, let me begin with what is this normal that we are referring to. The normal is, let me explain it in general terms, right? All of us are human beings, and as human beings, what is it that we do? If we are like a stone, we are not called human beings. We are called human beings because we act and also react to the factual world. That's what makes us live. Okay, The life, if you say I am living, which means you are acting in the world and you are reacting to the factual world that is given to you. So there is a given world that is in front of us to which we act and to which we react. Okay. So if this is the case, with how do you react and act and react to the world? You do that through your psychological and spiritual mechanism that you have as a human being. Okay. And it is not that this psychophysical human being mechanism that you have as human being or self, sometimes in some of the systems of philosophy as we call it, interacts with the factual world. It is not that the interaction is only one way. That's why I said acts and reacts as well. Okay. So the self acts and reacts to the factual world, and it mutually affects. Okay. The effect between the self and the factual world is mutual. One influences the other, one makes changes in the other, and it happens to both mutually. Okay. So that is the kind of life that we are leading in the normal. Do I need to say that we are not leading such kind of a life now? Or we will not be leading such kind of life tomorrow? Let me come to that point, okay? But now, okay, what are the characteristics of the life that I have envisaged in terms of a human being acting and reacting to the factual world through his psychophysical and spiritual mechanism, okay? In this kind of a normal world, what are the characteristics of this kind of normal world is very important for us to look at, okay? And one of the most important characteristics of this kind of normal world is freedom. We enjoy a lot of freedom, right? At least all of you agree with me if I say before January 2020, we were more free, if not absolutely free. At least we were more free than the kind of freedom that we are exercising now, and the kind of freedom that we may exercise in future. So this is one important aspect. The freedom gets freedom that we enjoyed in the normal was one of the characteristics of the normal was the freedom, human freedom that all of us have enjoyed. The second important aspect of this normal is repeatability. See, human beings always feel comfortable to act, right? Act actions, do actions which can be repeatable. Okay. And if you see the present situation, we see it as a crisis because you have to act in such a way that you may not be able to repeat such similar kind of actions tomorrow. So that's what creates a kind of anxiety in all of us. So we only feel comfortable if we can choose an action which can be repeatable. Okay. So repeatability was possible in the normal that the life in which we lived before January 2020. The third important characteristic is predictability. In the pre-COVID times, which means before January 2020, it is possible to predict certain things, okay? Predict other humans' actions and predict what happens next, and predict, and that is how we were able to move along in the world. So this is another important aspect and another important characteristics of normal that we are referring to. So now I have listed out freedom, repeatability, and predictability. And all these things, all these three were possible in the pre-COVID times because of the trust. We were able to trust that something happens, trust the other, trust the institution, trust whatever organization in which we are. So this trust the other in the social relations, trust the other in the family relations. So the trust was so strong among each one of us, which has really helped in making the life during pre-COVID very comfortable. Okay, so the characteristics of normal that I thought I should list out and understand them so that we would understand how each one of these aspects have affected either negatively or at least marginally in the present situation, which means the transition time, and also in the future situation, which means the new normal that we are looking at. So this is one important aspect. Now I said every human being acts and reacts to the factual world okay, through psychophysical mechanism. This is what I said. And this has these characteristics that I have listed out so far now. Now, what happened? What happened to the normal? Okay, so if I'm saying something has happened to the normal, only then I should talk about the new normal. So the question comes, what happened to this? Something that interestingly happened to this normal is the normal, in the normal situation, in the present situation, the factual world that I'm referring to, to which the human being is acting and reacting, is suspended. If you go by phenomenological terminology, it is bracketed. The factual world in front of us, okay, factual world with which we are all very fascinatingly and very fondly acting and reacting to, is suddenly bracketed and suddenly suspended. And the three mechanisms that were used were lockdown, quarantine, and social distancing. Okay, through these three mechanisms, the world that is given to you, factual world with which you fondly associate yourself, is suddenly bracketed and suddenly suspended. Now, this is what has happened to the normal, and now individual has to react to such kind of a situation. So, what will happen if the factual world is suspended? What will happen in that? No? Which means the possibility of repetition, as I mentioned in the characteristics of normal, the possibility of repetition is marginalized. The possibility of predictability is lessened, because I cannot predict what would happen tomorrow, and I cannot repeat my actions as I was doing during normal times, and the trust that I had on the other is also strongly affected. Okay, so this is very important for us. When I say the trust is affected, I don't mean to say that the I lose trust in the other and other is intentionally ready to harm me. No, I don't mean that. But other can be an innocent and ignorant guy who may be carrying something which he himself may not know, right? We are talking about asymptomatic patients that we had around us. The other may be very good person and trustworthy one, but still unknowingly, unconsciously, he may be carrying something because of which the trust that we have built so far gets strongly affected. I'm not saying trust would be demolished completely, but trust would be strongly affected, which is a very important characteristic and which is very important consequence of suspension of the factual world that we are looking at, no? In which we are now. In fact, the transition period, I'm talking about transition period. And this creates a kind of a revision in our mind. Okay, it pushes us to bracket or suspend even our earlier understandings of humanness and human relations. Okay, it's not just affecting, it's not just making you sit at home. Okay, in fact, it is going deeper in the sense that it is asking you to reevaluate the kind of meanings that you have given to human life and the kind of existence, human existence that you are addressing at, and the kind of nature of human being that you have already tried to establish in terms of, if you go by early Greek terms like man is a social animal. This is what you have heard people talking so many times, you know, all this along. Now you have to wait and see whether you would go really with the definition of man is a social being, because now we are asking everybody to be social distancing being, right? So what kind of changes or shifts that are coming up in the conceptions of human nature that the history has proposed so far is very important, and all of them would get affected strongly, and we have to address that. Okay, and what is it this kind of situation is creating? And pushes us to a kind of uncertainty. Okay, so that's what we are living in, a kind of uncertainty. And uncertainty of what? Uncertainty of space and uncertainty of time. Uncertainty of time in the sense that you don't know the duration. we would always be thinking that, yeah, it would end very soon. And we also have a suspicion about such kind of a statement, right? So we think that it may end soon or it may end after 1 year. We don't know about that. So this is very important. No? This kind of uncertainty is very important, and which is affecting each one of us. We have to take note of that. And space, okay, uncertainty in terms of space. We don't know which is safe. What is a safe space? You don't know. At least sometime back, I mean, pre-COVID times, I mean, before January 2020, at least in India, you know certain spaces which are safe for you, safe for an individual. Okay, but now, can you imagine any space to be safe? It's so difficult. So this uncertainty is also, in terms of space and time, is something that characterizes our mind, that goes beyond the mere perceptions that we have in the life. And the third one is very important to me. Third characteristic of uncertainty that is there in all our minds. You know, we know something, and we also know that there is something unknown. Okay, so we don't have any problem as long as it is something unknown. Okay, we usually only get concerned with something that is known, and we will be happy moving forward with the known. And we also sometimes make attempts to know unknown as well. Okay, which means bringing unknown into the known domain is one of the concerns of research. Okay, all of us, what do we do in research? Basically, we try to make unknown knowable. Okay, now in the present situation, in the transition period, what is happening now? I'm not audible. Okay, yeah. In the present situation, what is happening is, see, if you know only half of unknown, it's so disturbing. Okay, try to understand that. If you know something, if you don't know something, both these premises are fine. If you only know half of the unknown, it is as good as saying half of known. Okay, so if it is, if you know only half of unknown, it would result in larger uncertainty, broader uncertainty, and stronger uncertainty in the mind than anything else. That is how the ontology of the individual gets affected. Okay, so we understand this ontology, right? How do we conceive ourselves as a being in the world in relation to the other? Okay, so this ontology strongly gets affected because the unknown is only half known, and the time and space also put you in a sort of uncertainty. And this is what in the background of the human consciousness. So this ontology, human ontology gets affected, and it asks each one of us to re-understand the relation of the self with the other. The relation of the self with the other is to be re-understood, reoriented, and this is what the present uncertain situation, the transition situation, the transition times urge us to go, right? Self in, how do you see? Do you want to see self in the other? Okay, as some of us very generously donate a lot of money looking at self in the other. Okay, this is one way of human expressions. And it can also be that other in the self, you see other in the self, and then you respond to the call of the other. And it is also that it can also promote self with the other. Okay, to try to go with the other and try to contribute. These are the positive modes that I've stated, but there could be negative modes of an ontology as well. Now, how do you relate yourself to the other? This is where it is very important to know. We always have to move from I to we. Okay, one of my doctor friends has said in the recent past, like the move from I to we is illness to wellness. He said, okay, you write this illness and then remove I from there, add we. So the move from illness to wellness is move from I to we. Okay, that's what we should look at, and that's what we should aspire at. But now, enough about what happened to the present, what happened to the normal transition period that we are referring to. Let me go to what is this new normal that we are talking about. Okay, if I have to explain that, I think Dr. Javed, I have a few more minutes time. I don't know whether I have crossed my limits, but I think I'll finish it in 5 minutes. Okay, I hope I have 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Sorry for going beyond the time limit that is given to me.
No, no, it's okay, sir.
Yeah, I was referring to this new normal that we are talking about. Okay, I have prepared the platform for in terms of what is normal and how normal has got affected. Now we are reaching the new normal. What occasions the new normal is very important. What constitutes the new normal is very important, and how new normal is to be promoted is very important, so that we would reach the new normal in a safe and comfortable way. Okay, these three aspects I would talk, and I would stop there. Okay, what occasions the new normal? What occasions the new normal is, which means it makes the new normal to come into existence. What occasions this new normal is ambiguity, because we understood that there is a sort of uncertainty that builds up. If you have uncertainty, the consequence of that is a kind of ambiguity. Okay, ambiguity between symptomatic and asymptomatic. Okay, you don't know which is symptomatic and who is symptomatic and who is asymptomatic. So this kind of ambiguity would continue, and this is one of the things that occasions the new normal. And the second important aspect of the aspect which occasions new normal is ambivalence. Ambivalence in choosing to act. Okay, human action is very important, and you don't know whether you should act at all. No, because now you should not even come out of home. So you don't know whether you should act, and only if you start acting, you will come to the point of whether you should act rightly or wrongly. So the ambivalence between action, okay, ambivalence within the agent with regard to act or not to act is very important, and which occasions this new normal that we are going to think of. And the third important aspect is inability to distinguish between trust and mistrust. Okay, you don't know whether you should trust or you should not trust, because not because the other is harmful to you, but because you are not in a you don't have the capacity to distinguish the trust and mistrust. So this is another important aspect which occasions this new normal. And the fourth one is very important. This is the crux of the whole thing: epistemological impossibility. Okay, what is this epistemological impossibility? Epistemological impossibility to go back to pre-COVID times. Okay, this is the another very important aspect which occasions new normal. When I say epistemological impossibility, for example, what I mean is, for example, if there is a very innocent guy who doesn't know anything about human rights, okay, you teach him human rights, then he would start asserting himself. Now he understands that when he doesn't know about human rights, he was very happy, and once he understood that he has human rights, then he would start struggling with himself and struggling with the world. So he would be like little dissatisfied with his present condition, right? So this is now he cannot go back to the previous times. He cannot go back to his innocence, right? Ignorance. And this is the epistemological impossibility. And this kind of epistemological impossibility is there now in all of us, that we cannot, we think of our pre-COVID times, but we cannot go to those times. So this is what basically occasions the new normal that we are referring to. But what comes out of this occasioning is two important things: anxiety and fear. Since you're uncertain, you're living in a kind of uncertainty, since the life or things that you look at around and try to act are ambiguous, and there is a kind of ambivalence, and there is an inability on your part to trust or mistrust, and this epistemological impossibility, all of them combinedly try to create a kind of anxiety and fear in each one of us. These are the constituents of the new normal that we are referring to. Even if we reach the new normal, there would be a continuous anxiety and there would be a continuous fear which we have to handle continuously. Okay, so this is what constitutes the new normal. But how do we promote this? No, how new normal should promote itself, or how should we conceive this new normal is very important to me, and that is where I have my own understanding and looking at the individuals and trying to understand the nature of the individuals. That's where I come to this point, like how do individuals perceive themselves? Okay, self-perception. I come to this self-perception part now, where we have to promote this new normal in terms of alignment, realignment. Okay, what do I mean by this alignment? I hope all of you, those who have vehicles, you understand that wheel would be aligned. Vehicle of a wheel would be aligned. So when they say they are aligning the wheel, what is it that they are doing? Alignment basically means adjustment of the parts in relation to each other. Okay, it's not just straightening the wheel. Okay, alignment is basically adjusting a particular part in relation to the other. Okay, so adjusting each of the parts in relation to the other is what is alignment. If you take an individual human being to be a combination of physical, psychological, spiritual, and cosmological, whatnot. Okay, you can add any as much parts as possible that you can think of. If you do that, then what is required on your part is to align each one of them. As an individual, as a human being, what is required on your part is to align each one of these aspects or parts of the self or individual that you are thinking of. Okay, so and you have to align them so that it would be suitable or in consonance with the or in harmony with the other parts. That is what is very important. So now the time has come, we have to look at each one of our components of the self and try to realign them. Okay, because the factual life, factual world I have referred to you is suspended temporarily, and it would open to us after some time. Okay, so but it would not be the similar kind of world again. So where you cannot make changes there. You can only make changes in the psychophysical mechanism that I'm referring to, self that I'm referring to. So if that is required, what kind of changes that you should make? You have to think of realignment of the self. Okay, realignment of the various parts of the self. That's what is required. That is number one. And number two is reconceptualization of various aspects of human life. Okay, social, political, global, whatever, familial as well. Okay, all these aspects of human life are to be reconceptualized, and again they are to be realigned. Okay, because each one of them are going to be strongly affected in the new normal, which pushes us strongly to look for reconceptualization and also realignment. And how does this, how would this happen? It has to happen in a very creative and innovative way, and increase the creative and innovative way to do what? To do or to understand or to increase the possibility of predictability, to increase the possibility of repeatability, and to increase the possibility of trust among each one of us, which is very important to each one of our future course of life and the new normal that we are trying to understand. So with this COVID-19 situation, as our friend has proposed this theme, combating the viral threats to human existence. Of course, we have to combat the viral threats to human existence, but we also have to make certain adjustments in our own perceptions, and we have to make certain kind of adjustments within our own conscient parts of the self. That is what is required, and that is where There are shifts in the perception, self-perception of the individual, and there are paradigm shifts from normal to new normal that have come into existence, which are to be properly understood. And this is the job of philosophers. And I'm glad that the college, Seth Anandaram Jaipuria College, has thought of this wonderful aspect and brought the philosophers together. And I specifically appreciate Mohammad Javed Hassan for this initiative. And I also thank all the organizers for this wonderful opportunity that they have given me. And I thank the audience, viewers, for their patient hearing. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable speech. And this is very enriching and thought-provoking discussion, I think. We hear these words, but we cannot think such a way you have said here. So, sir, if we can hear some more words from you, then we will be benefited. But as because our time is too much limited, that's why without being delayed, I'd like to request our next honorable speaker, Professor Moushumi Guha of Department of Philosophy of Jadavpur University. Please, ma'am.
Thank you
Hello?
so much. Thank you so much. Can you hear me, all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Am I clearly audible, or is there any?
Yes, ma'am.
No,
No, clear.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. First and foremost, obviously, I would love to thank the organizers of the college. Of course, beginning with my very dear student, Javed, for thinking of this theme. And like the previous speaker, Professor Balaganapati Devarakonda, I am also a little surprised about the mention of the darkened glass of philosophy. But it has given me an opportunity to think how philosophy can help, or I think help is not the right word, how philosophy can contribute in any way to a crisis situation of the nature that we have at this point of time. I am sure that all of us here who are participating in this webinar today are first time witnesses to this range of crisis. I don't think we have ever seen anything like this before. So with that, without any further delay, I would like to read out what I have actually written, because I thought that it might help me to keep the flow of thoughts if I had certain things written down before me. So I would request all of you to keep your microphones muted so that I can read as smoothly and as fast as I can. So I've named my paper philosophical, I've named my paper the Corona Crisis, Metaphysics versus Statistics. This is the title of the paper. I'm sorry, I can still hear a few voices in the background. It would be a great help if you could keep your microphones muted. Dr. Bharat Malakar, I think I can hear your microphone for a long time. Could you kindly please mute?
Hello? Hello, please. All participants are requested to please mute your microphones. Please, sorry, ma'am.
Thank you, Professor Paul. Thank you. Thank you. So the title of the paper is The Corona Crisis, Metaphysics versus Statistics. And I couldn't resist giving a subtitle, which is Philosophy During a Pandemic. Wherever we are in the world now, we are reeling under the impact of a serious health crisis that originated in China and spread rapidly all over the globe, wiping out unsuspecting lives and leaving millions gasping for a breath of the air that is essential to our lives. Within a span of 3 to 4 months, masks, gloves, PPEs, face shields, and sanitizers have come into our lives and figure among our daily hygiene. This is something that our previous speaker also mentioned, that the new normal. Much like toothbrush, toothpaste, and soap, they are probably here to stay with us for a long time. Those of us who are still alive and unaffected are suffering from a terrible angst about this invisible microscopic enemy. For we don't know when or how it will cross our paths or how it will affect us if it does. Through our days of containment, we are now coping with our uncertainties in a deeply significant way. It is worth observing that we humans, struck by an unknown virus with the potential to kill, have passed through phases of total despair, of helpless gratefulness and surrender to the medical staff, followed by exasperation that science has not done us any good as yet. Let me go into these phases. I have mentioned 3 phases. During this very short period of time, 3 to 4 months is not a very long time, but I think these 3 to 4 months have been one of the most significant 3 to 4 months in our lives. And I thought that there are a few phases that one could identify. And I have identified 3. I mention them once again. The first phase I mentioned as the phase of total despair, the second of helpless gratefulness and surrender to medical people, to medical personnel, and the last or the third, I don't know if it is the last, it's the third, uh, exasperation that science has not done us any good as yet. Let me go into these phases a little bit more. As early as December 2019, we were reading about the outbreak in China, worried how the country would contain it so that it doesn't spread to other parts of the world through trade and passenger pathways. Our worst fears got confirmed when air travelers started importing the virus and aiding its spread. The power of open trade that defies all political polarizations is such that countries as wise, quote unquote, wise as India, as cultured, quote unquote, as Italy and France, and as rich and powerful, once again, quote unquote, as the USA, took time to decide what to do. At this juncture, let me give a quick reminder that all my observations are from the point of view of informed common sense. The sources of information include newspapers, online resources, medical updates by authorized agencies, and even some research material. So as we saw, we the populace if you wish, fell into despair not knowing in whose hands our destinies lay. But then governments and other authorized agencies stepped in. Lockdowns were announced in different parts of the world, including India. Though apprehensive, we the people sighed a huge sigh of relief as we were told that we were safe with social distancing, quote unquote, and home confinement. For even before these were formally announced, clever, knowledgeable, and sensible people were already following those norms. In my own house, my elder daughter had stopped going cycling with her friends. My mother-in-law had limited her daily outings to the fish market, and my husband had started working from home and stopped traveling by air. Many of my colleagues had already stopped entry of household helps and drivers to their residences, and much before the formal declaration of the lockdown. Common sense had stepped in much before the agencies and the specialists. The second phase, the phase of gratefulness, was about to begin. It began with the clang of planned applauses. All over the world, people were clapping and crying in gratefulness for the doctors, nurses, and medical personnel who were fighting at the frontiers to make sure that the worst affected had a chance to survive. The despair gratefulness despair balance kept tipping mostly on the side of despair. When healthcare workers started falling prey in countless numbers, people watched, not knowing what to do, but always cautioning each other that it was best not to venture out. Even within the limited circle of gratefulness, the waning and waxing of that positive emotion had a certain helplessness about it. When the temples, churches, and mosques were closed, as our principal, the honorable principal of the college, has mentioned, when the temples, churches, and mosques were closed, even the gods were unapproachable. The human gods, in the form of health workers, seemed to be the only twig that the drowning masses could hang on to. This led to a certain helpless surrender, which manifested itself in the form of TV interviews, an impatient wait for medical bulletins, and most importantly, a yet unfulfilled expectation for a prevention or a cure. People got exasperated. Now, this is the third phase. People got exasperated when the wait bore no fruit, and when news started pouring in that no prevention or cure was on the anvil anytime soon. Any scientific research, particularly in biomedical science, takes time to yield significant results, and hence no risks can be taken as regards side effects. The scientific community therefore hesitates to release recommendations without an acceptable degree of confirmation. Reconstructing the story of the pandemic in the midst of which we all are is important for my purpose. I'm saying this because you might think, why is she repeating all the things that we already know? But this is a kind of reconstruction, remember. It is important for my purpose. It helps me formulate the central question of my inquiry. That question is, has science failed to some extent in the face of this pandemic? Can philosophy stand up to fulfill the required gap? Just at this point, many of you will pounce upon me for apparently suggesting that we must look beyond science in tackling the COVID-19 crisis. People might think falsely that I am suggesting that science is no good. Hence, we must resort to other sources of information and action, and we all know what a dangerous recommendation that could be. No, I am not suggesting any such thing. In this context, let me give you a gentle reminder once again that we must stop thinking of ourselves as commoners, because we are within an academic context. We are here as philosophers, and we are all aware that philosophy of science is an important and established branch of this subject. When questions are raised, with regards to various aspects of scientific practice and theorizing. So, my questions are philosophical ones, not addressing the commoner, but addressing the practicing institutional philosopher. In other words, my purpose in this talk is not to undermine science and put ourselves at risk, but to inquire into the gaps in scientific theorizing and practice that may help scientists address future pandemics, or even this one, with greater efficacy, or at least admit those gaps and set up a systematic framework to assess them. It is undeniable that science is groping around for clues to solve the COVID-19 crisis. If we spend some more time thinking of the various updates and advisories given by important medical bodies like the WHO, the CDC, the ICMR, or even local bodies that are directly grappling with the pandemic, we will find a sense of directionlessness. It all started with WHO's recommendation not to wear masks unless infected by coronavirus. As early as March 31st, there is evidence for such an advisory against mask wearing in major international news networks like the CNN. And whatever I'm saying here is backed up by proper evidence. I have all the documents, and if ever the organizers ask for any references, I will be able to provide it to all the participants. So as early as March 31st, there is evidence for such an advisory against mask wearing in major international news networks like the CNN. At the time of such an advisory, individuals and even nations had already started making the wearing of masks customary and mandatory. Under pressure from different organizations like the CDC of USA, WHO was forced to revise its advisory in early June. Imagine, by early June, almost all countries had made wearing of mask compulsory, whereas WHO gave or published the advisory to wear masks in early June. Heavyweight organizations like the WHO, oscillating between contrary advisories, sends out an extremely negative message to the general public. The mask confusion, in fact, is merely the surface of a deep-rooted state of ignorance or lack of satisfactory indicators about the origin, nature, behavior, and mutations of the cause of the pandemic, namely the SARS-CoV-2 virus. The lack of any respectable degree of confidence in the scientific knowledge about novel coronavirus seems even more conspicuous from the differing accounts of the available statistical data with regard to age, pre-existing health conditions, affectionately termed comorbidities, organs or organ systems affected, for example, lungs or kidneys or heart, lifestyle, for example, non-alcoholic, smoker, sedentary lifestyle, athletic, etc. Even gender, or now latest, blood group. Under all these categories of statistical compartmentalization, the novel coronavirus has slyly evaded all final conclusions and defied all safeguards. It is as though the virus is titillating the edgy scientist and testing his patience until it breaks. Think then of the havoc that these perplexing reports are playing on the commoner. Think of her frustration, her exasperation. She is surely throwing her hands up in the air and crying for divine reprieve. But not apparently. The human on the streets has overcome all fear of death and willingly embraced the new dress code, mask, shield, gloves and all, to combat a multiplying army of deadly viruses, accepting the hand wash challenge without so much as a sigh. This confidence or yearning to fight back, raring to go and earn a living or fend for food or entertainment or merely the company of a loved one is starkly contrary to the sagging scientific confidence exuding from a series of flip-flops by the champions in the health sector. Due to my long-standing interest in the question, what is philosophy, and other associated issues, I found the COVID-19 scenario to be an ideal turning point for all serious meta-philosophers who take exception to the common criticism that philosophy doesn't help. Up until now, I have not referred to any aspect of technical philosophy. My introduction has been quite at the level of introspective common sense. Let me now move on to a little bit of philosophical jargon. Among the keywords that I must provide a working definition for are philosophy of science, metaphilosophy, naturalism, and metaphysics. This is required because the domains within which my questions lie are philosophy of science and metaphilosophy. Now, I've used the term metaphilosophy a few moments back. So let me begin by briefly clarifying what it is. Though the prefix meta may confuse, metaphilosophy lies very much within the domain of philosophy and is currently one of the important areas of research, with at least one dedicated journal and several philosophers pursuing it with zeal. In metaphilosophy, philosophers and sometimes others ask questions pertaining to the nature, method, validation, and demarcation of the domain of philosophy. So, all questions regarding the value of philosophy in addressing serious crises like the present pandemic fall under the domain of metaphilosophy. I hope you can still hear me, all of you.
Yes, yes, of course, please.
Okay, thank you. Now, metaphilosophy is a very close cousin of philosophy of science. Indeed, some would say that the latter is a branch of the former. Even if I do not go so far, I do wish to reiterate that there are vast areas common to the two. Questions regarding the value of philosophy vis-a-vis science, questions about the comparative abilities of the two in terms of tackling crisis are definitely common to both metaphilosophy and philosophy of science, though metaphilosophy addresses them directly. In any case, it must now be clear that my question, has science failed to some extent in the face of this pandemic? Can philosophy stand up to fulfill the required gap? Concerns metaphilosophy and philosophy of science. Let me quickly jump over to the first part of the question. To establish any deemed failure on the part of science or to allege any mismanagement, we must ask what science is and how scientists must act in accordance with the ideals set before them. In this context, I am reminded of the common philosophical refrain that science fails due to its disconnect with ethics. So, ethics as a branch of philosophy must do the job of cementing or filling all gaps that the ethically neutral pursuit of science leaves in its trail. But in my paper, I intend not to walk down this oft-taken road to save philosophy from disgrace or point fingers at science. So it is my duty to say in what sense I construe any possible failure on the part of science, which means that I am not interested in talking about ethics as a rescue for philosophy. It's not as if ethics is the only branch of philosophy that can help us cover up for the mistakes or gaps that science has left behind. There are other parts of philosophy which can do equally well. So, I construe any possible failure on the part of science in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. In reply, I must talk about an important branch of philosophy that is now often overlooked when talking about the significant contributions of philosophy in the face of serious crisis. That branch is metaphysics. In the course of its long journey, where philosophers themselves ignored the role of metaphysics in answering important questions, scientists took the opportunity to rely more and more on statistical correlations rather than causal connections. To my mind, the present crisis of science is a bidirectional one from the side of science as well as from the side of philosophy. In ignoring metaphysical issues of ontology, necessity, causality, and the like, philosophers have inadvertently snapped any thin connections remaining between itself and science. Science had already drifted away from philosophy in practical and methodological matters. Usually, I reprimand philosophers for taking any stance that logically distances them from science. Usually, naturalism is that philosophical window through which bonds of connectivity are maintained between science and philosophy. But in the face of this pandemic, I see things in a fresh new light, and the mood has set in for a fresh reprimand, the target of which this time is science. With its excessive dependence on data, big or small, and total reliance on existing theoretic frameworks, which are again built upon a largely acquired body of data, science has lost touch with its glorious age, the age in which scientists like Einstein and philosophers of science like Kuhn were talking about science as not merely a set of techniques or methodologies, but as something more, involving scientific sense, serendipity, and wisdom, as opposed to mere technical or theoretical knowledge or statistical acumen. The snapping of its connection with metaphysics and excessively leaning on data, use of instruments and tests, has reduced many a scientist into a technician. We observe around us medical professionals lacking the clinical eye, relying on umpteen expensive tests and giving nervous or inconclusive results or prescriptions, using patients as human subjects, much against their Hippocratic oath. What science suffers from today is a syndrome of current practice and is perhaps no fault of the individual scientist. The lines demarcating science, profession, and technology are fuzzy, starting from the rules of entry, which are now less governed by the idea of seeking truth, which is a metaphysical category, and more by the prospects of earning cash or status, to the process of acquiring scientific knowledge, rote and repetition rather than comprehension and analysis. Science has come very far away from its original promise of inculcating a positive spirit in an inquisitive mind. An inquisitive mind, encultured in real science, cannot stay forever detached from metaphysical inquiry. Such metaphysical inquiry is, I believe, the need of the hour. But this metaphysical inquiry is not the job of the philosopher, or not the job of the philosopher as such. It is the real job of the real scientist who has grasped the essence of science. Such a scientist, even when drowned in stochastic measurements in a laboratory full of materials and apparatus, must keep asking, what is this virus? How is it causing the illness? What is the illness? What are the substances that target and destroy the virus without harming humans? It is my feeling, and perhaps I'm wrong, that this real science is mostly gone from the practice, and this real science is not afraid of metaphysics. Let me end with a quote from Einstein, which I found in a paper with a really interesting title, Why Science Needs Philosophy. This paper I found in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, volume 116, and was published in March 2019, just a year before the pandemic hit us. In quotation, Einstein says, a knowledge of the historic and philosophical background gives that kind of independence from prejudices of his generation from which most scientists are suffering. This independence created by philosophical insight is, in my opinion, the mark of distinction between a mere artisan or specialist and a real seeker after truth. This is from Letter to Robert Thornton, who was an Afro-American philosopher of science in 1944. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for being so patient.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your illuminating lecture and sharing your thoughts regarding this topic. And undoubtedly, we are really enriched to hear your valuable speech. Both Professor Bala and Professor Guha have expressed their thoughts in front of us regarding this topic. And all the participants, if you have any questions to ask our dignitary speakers, then put your questions in the chat box, and we will try to discuss your questions in our interactive session after hearing our another 4 speakers. Now we will request our 4 another speakers for presenting their papers. We are very happy to announce that we have another 4 speakers with us. Dr. Neelina Ghosh, Associate Professor of Philosophy, South Calcutta Girls College. Professor Lahori Bandyopadhyay, Assistant Professor, Department of Philosophy, DNC College, Aurangabad, Murshidabad. Professor Koel Kole, Department of Philosophy, Shobharani Memorial College, and Ms. Sanchuita Sen, PhD Research Scholar, Department of Philosophy, Jadavpur University. And now I'd like to request Dr. Neelina Ghosh for presenting her paper on the topic, the pandemic and ethical and moral approach. Please.
Hello.
Dr. Neelina Ghosh.
Yes. Good evening to all of you. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good evening, and I thank the organizers for giving me the chance to present my paper. Since time is only 5 minutes, I will summarize my presentation in few points. As we are discussing and experiencing, the world is in grave crisis. So the immediate issue is how to combat the situation. I have highlighted certain keywords. They are: number 1, concern; number 2, care; number 3, connect; number 4, catharsis; and last one is commitment. First one is concern. People of different age groups are anxious about this present situation. It may be the students, the teachers, the professionals, householders. So what is at present, we should forget our immediate utilitarian objectives and try to think of the people who are the worst sufferers, particularly the poor people. Number 2 is care. I think attention to people is needed, particularly the aged people, the terminally ill people. They need special attention during this time. Number 3 is connect. We should not lament about our immediate lost world of proximity and closeness. We have to build up a world of new possibilities. We have to adjust to the new system of virtual communication to establish bond among ourselves. Number 4 is catharsis. Whenever we find that we fail to adjust to a particular situation, we get irritated, angry, and anxious. Such situations, they elicit negative emotions and they affect our personal relationships and cause mental trauma. So we need physical and spiritual exercises to clean our body and mind in order to maintain our physical and mental well-being. We have to concentrate on, we have to read books with positive message. We have to engage ourselves in different recreational activities like painting, dancing, looking over the household plants, etc., etc. And last but not least is the commitment. We should think and act responsibly. We should remember that we are members of a family in which the good of each member counts. We should abandon our anthropocentric emphasizing on the main points. And I have mentioned the Bhumi Shukta of Rishi Atharva in the Atharva Veda. He said that it's our obligation to pay respect to nature. The Upanishad also teaches us to develop an attitude of respect and responsibility towards nature. Last, I have mentioned the philosophy of Taoism. According to it, disaster is a natural phenomenon. It can strike at any moment. It should not be viewed as a punishment by God. It results from interplay of forces. The earthquake from the pressure in the earth, the hurricane from wind and storm. We must remember that no matter how extreme a situation is, it will change. It cannot continue forever. For instance, a great forest fire is always destined to burn at a time. So natural events, they balance themselves out by seeking their opposites. The process takes time, days, years. Things will take time to get back, to return to the normal. All life is continual destruction and healing over and over again. So we have to be patient. We have to integrate ourselves with the flow of nature, endure the pain and difficulties, and look forward for better days to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your grand and engrossing presentation. So all participants, hello. Please, all participants are requested to mute your microphone. Hello, can you hear me? Why are you not muting your microphone?
Hello, I think the host can also mute them.
তখন বললেন এক কাজ করো ওদেরকে বলবি পরের সেমে যখন টাকা দিতে হবে তখন আগে থেকে অফিসে এসে জানায় তখন যদি কনসেশন করা যায়
The host can mute everyone, please.
এখন মানুষ খেতে পাচ্ছে না
Now I'd like to request our next speaker, Professor Lohuri Bandyopadhyay, Assistant Professor, Department of Philosophy, DNC College, on a topic, the logical insight of Mahasukha, recalling the central thoughts of Buddhism in the pandemic era. Please, Professor Bandyopadhyay.
I'm quite junior, and it's great to present the paper in front of MG ma'am, our beloved teacher. Thanks for the opportunity. I have just 5 minutes. I'll try to cover this area. The topic is the logical insight of Mahasukha, recalling the central thoughts of Buddhism in this pandemic era. The current pandemic situation put us to ask the very old question of life: why do we suffer and how to get rid of it? The question haunts the Buddhist philosophy the most from the very beginning until. Therefore, the strong Buddhist logic has also been developed on this very basis that yes, we do suffer and yes, we want to get rid of it. Buddha has seen the causal chain of pleasure and pain destined our life which need to be broken. Underlying observation in Buddhism is based on this very principle of identifying the binaries of the world. And of course, while the Buddhist practice ensures the beyond, that means the path of attaining the ultimate bliss or Mahasukha. Now, what is the meaning of Mahasukha? According to Monier Dictionary, etymologically, kha means the whole. So sukha or dukha, that means the good whole and the bad whole. It signifies it's like Ratha Chakra, Chakravat Parivartante Dukhani cha Sukhani cha. So it comes and go. Keeping this in our mind, we are about to revisit the different sampradayas of Buddhism on this very note of binaries and beyond. Starts from the Mahayana Buddhism to Bengal Buddhism Charjapad, which is my main focus in this paper. In this short time, I'll just show a trailing path of Buddhism on this, and very briefly, remembering Nagarjuna's dialectic from his Shunyata Shaptati, he mentions existence and non-existence, beginning and end, better and worse are not actual tattva, but only the practical ways of speaking or loko vyavahara. For Nagarjunas, the beyond is sunya or empty, free from all four categories, Chatushkoti Binirmukto. The logic of declining two opposites or any kind of binaries slowly indicates a seeker to follow the path of Vijnanavada or the next step of Buddhist practice that involves compassion or karuna for the world in their practice. In Advaya Vajra Sangraha, written by Advayapad, the great monk, he wonderfully says that Madhyamikas realize I am sunya, while the Yogacharyans realize I am conscious that I am sunya. In later discourse, there are mainly two practices, Paramita Noyo and Mantra Noyo. It turns into the tantric practice as Vajrajana. Now, what is the significance of Vajra? Vajra is sunya or emptiness itself. It is the allegoric weapon, like the diamond signifies that the final realization that sharply pierces the veil of ignorance. This Vajrayana school extended into Sahajajana especially in Bengal. This school is free from all ritualistic rigor of Vajrayana school. Sahaja signifies knowing the simple, simply knowing the simple. That means the means and goal both are sahaja. There are only one textual proof, that is Charjapad, discovered by Mahamohopadhyay Horoprasad Shastri in 20th century, named as Charjacharya Vinishchay. I'm just quoting two lines from there. All 50 verses, all 50 poetries, they're full of this insight that find the binary and go beyond it. I'm quoting just Chatilopad. He wrote, Bhabanahi gahana gabhiro bege bahi, duante chihil majhe na thahi, dharmarthe chatil sankamagoroi, paragami loa nibharataroi. That means the continuous flow of samsara, like the ever-flowing river, is difficult to cross. On the one side, there lies the emptiness or sunyata. On the other side, there lies the compassion or karuna. One who wants to cross the river must negate the both ends, and Chatila will help. The Sahaja practice shows the golden middle path to maintain a balance between these two extremes. Sarahapada says that ujure chhadi ma lehure banka, niya hi bohi na je hure lanka. Oh, the seekers, do not follow the indirect path, leaving the direct path, because bodhi is very near to you. What I'm trying to say that if one realizes that the binary is the fact of the world and we should go beyond the binary, then we can also combat this current pandemic era. So I'm going to finish on this very note, that because this is the high time to remember Buddha's word and his great teaching, that life is so uncertain, that oscillates in the binaries, but because suffering is always certain, one must go beyond it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your elegant and beautiful discussion you have shared with us. And now I'd like to request our third speaker, Dr. Kuil Kole, Department of Philosophy, Shobharani Memorial College, on the topic, the 4 Noble Truths in Combating COVID-19 for Human Existence. Hello, Dr. Kuil Kole. Are you there, Dr. Kole? Can you hear me, Dr. Kole?
Our microphone is muted.
Professor Paul, okay. Please unmute your microphone. Please unmute. Please unmute.
Hello, Dr. Kole. Can you hear me?
The microphone is muted.
No. We can hear you. Please carry on.
Professor Paul. Professor Paul, can you hear me?
Professor Kole, you are not audible. Professor Kole, you are not audible. You are not audible. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, Professor Kole.
You are still muted, madam.
Professor Kole, please unmute. Hello, can you hear me? Professor Kole, can you hear me? But we can't hear you, ma'am.
Kole, perhaps you should not use that earphone. Can you try without the earphone once and see if it works?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, okay. Can I read my, will I have to read my paper from the very beginning?
Yes, ma'am, we can't hear you.
Oh, okay,
so
okay.
Please, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, yes, please.
Okay. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizers to select my paper for presentation. The title of my paper is The Four Noble Truths in Combating COVID-19 for Human Existence. The Four Noble Truths are often symbolized as a beautiful lotus or poddo growing out of the mud at the bottom of a pond. Buddha's Four Noble Truths are: there are dukkha, dukkha has root or causes, there is the reality of nirvana or freedom from dukkha, and there is a path leading to freedom, the Eightfold Path. Now let us see how Buddha's Four Noble Truths has combating relation with the present situation of novel coronavirus. The question naturally arises, could coronavirus, which is causing suffering across the globe, be like the mud of a lotus pond? Could humanity and the social, economic, and ecological systems we are part of blossoms like a beautiful lotus that grows from the smelly compost at the bottom of a pond? Following Gautam Buddha's view that where there is suffering, there is also the possibility for freedom, because after every dark night, there is a bright morning. So, according to Buddha, we can find psychological freedom even within this horrendous crisis. Now, let me focus on the discussion how this pandemic situation is related to Buddha's Four Noble Truths. Number one, there is suffering. The first noble truth, there is suffering with coronavirus, and it's unavoidable in this present situation, inescapable. It's a fact that we all will die no matter how much we try to live a life free of pain. Most of us will experience sickness, and we all experience physical and emotional pain to various degrees. And right now, COVID-19 is just another way we experience suffering in our life. Number two, there is the cause of suffering. The second noble truth, actually the cause of suffering is not the pain itself. Rather, it is habitual patterns of trying to reject or get rid from what brings discomfort and grasp what brings pleasure. We cling desperately to the fundamental belief that we are solid and separate from the world around us, what in Buddhism called ego clinging. We are trying to get rid from all the painful feelings that we are getting from coronavirus right now and rejecting anything that feels threatening. But I am also frantically grasping for things outside of myself that I think will make me feel better, happier, more secure. And this rejecting and clinging comes out of my belief that I am solid and separate, that there is some I which needs to be protected at all costs. Number three, that freedom from suffering. Although pain is inevitable, suffering is not. But if the causes of suffering are passion, aggression, and ignorance, then surely we can break the cycle of our suffering by disrupting these habitual patterns of rejecting, grasping, or ignoring. Number four, there is a path of leading to freedom, the fourth noble truth. This is where meditation comes into place. The way out of suffering is by cultivating wisdom and compassion through mindfulness. By practicing meditation, we can extend our ability to stay present during these challenging situations. Meditation is the way which increases our ability to face hardship, not with an attitude of apathy, hopelessness, or shutdown, but with unwavering courage and open hearts. We cultivate the ability to stay with whatever arises. We are all in this together, and together we can compassionately bring an end to the dukkha of coronavirus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for sharing your thoughts with us. And sorry once again for our inconvenience. And now I'd like to request our last speakers is Sanchuita Sher, PhD scholar of Jadavpur University. Please, Miss Sher.
Hello, ma'am. I can't switch on the video. Could anyone please help me with the video? I have unmuted myself, but I can't switch on the video. How do I do that?
Beside the mute button, is there a video button?
Yes, I have clicked on it several times, but am I audible and visible now?
You are both audible and visible now.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so a very good afternoon to everybody. When I got to know about this seminar and I got to know about the theme, I had to think a little bit about what should I talk about in this presentation. Because of obvious reasons, this is quite different from the kind of things that we have been learning for years in traditional philosophical discourses. But then it kind of struck to my mind that why not discuss about certain very practical daily life problems that we have all been facing for the last few months due to this pandemic, and which are very common and relatable for all of us, and then discuss about certain basic ethical guidelines that I think will help all of us to combat with the present situation. So that is exactly what I decided to do. So the title of my paper is Morals for Dealing with Viral Threat. So when the viral threat has already spread all over the world and most of the countries are on either partial or complete lockdowns, I think no amount of yelling at the news and the media information or expressing grudges about the origin of the virus are going to make the viral threat go away. We should rather focus on more important tasks that we have in our hands right now. We must be aware of the ethical implications of the choices that we make and the actions that we perform. Hence, the questions arise, how do we make ethical decisions now, and what are the duties that we have? What should be the framework of our choices of actions? One of the most important problems that we are facing in this pandemic, after a huge number of people getting contaminated by the virus, is that due to major lockdowns, important events in every sector are being hindered. Reason being the haphazard cancellation of events, meetings, and conferences, some of the sectors are probably facing uncompensatable losses. But here, I believe that before maintaining the moral standards of a professional, we need to have a consequentialist framework. We should be aware of the fact that in the deliberate attempt of keeping those meetings and conferences unhampered, we would eventually fail to maintain the social distance with each other. And the potential negative outcomes of that decision will kind of overpower of the potential benefits of those meetings and conferences. Now, in order to prioritize the benefit of public health, we have to choose between three options. We can either cancel the events, postpone them, or we can do it virtually. And so far, I think all of us have been able to make the right call everywhere because we have chosen to do our work virtually. In that way, we are able to accomplish our tasks to a great extent, and at the same time, we can also avoid the risk of virus contamination. Here, the problem gets a little more complex because the idea of working virtually is not as easy as it seems apparently. There are a few drawbacks of the idea of working from home. In our country, keeping in mind that it is still developing in financial, technological, and many other significant aspects, I personally feel that working from home is still a luxury for most of us. Every worker cannot afford it. The service industry workers, for example, the people who work in restaurants, retails, and shopping malls, and the daily laborers are not likely to have the ability of doing any job remotely. In a lot of cases, the employees are at a loss of income. Moreover, they are not likely to have any sort of health insurances in this pandemic, unlike the higher earning professionals. While talking about the downside of virtual jobs, being a member of the academic community, I would specifically want to say something about virtual education. For the last few months, the idea of online classes have become really popular. It is true that in the lockdown period, only any sort of online educational interaction can provide us with the joy of being in touch with academics. There is no denial upon that. But I also feel that virtual education has not yet reached the benchmark where it can actually replace the conventional classroom teaching. The students who somehow are able to get the access to internet are facing a lot of problems due to the lack of direct interaction with the teacher. Hence, the successful outcome of this method of imparting knowledge remains dubitable. Our teachers in classrooms not only enlighten us by imparting knowledge, but the entire classroom environment introduces us with new sorts of life skill. And I do not want any of my fellow researchers and students to be deprived of that. Virtual teaching may serve a lot of purposes, but the harsh reality is that a large number of students in India do not have the internet access and the required gadgets for virtual classes. As a result, I cannot help but having this fear that this situation will create a new kind of inequity and disparity among the students. Now I would be discussing very briefly certain basic ethical guidelines which I think will help us to combat with the present situation. Firstly, we must psychologically accept the fact that we presently do not live and exist in the normal, regular world. Hence, the luxuries that happened to be pretty obvious previously may not still be available to us. And in this context, we must decide what we are willing to give up. It is not going to be easy at all. We might have to give up our freedom of roaming around and socializing. But for the sake of prioritizing the public health, we might have to do that. Since we do not possess the same amount of freedom as we previously did, we must be very careful about the transparency and the truthfulness of any information that we share and decide to believe. Since we do not have the scope to go out and check for the evidences in support of any news, we should be responsible enough to verify the authority of the circulating information. And by verifying the information, I mean we need to be clear, accurate, and precise as much as possible about those information. And we should critically think about those issues using our intellectual ability and responsibility. And lastly, we must acknowledge the fact that some of us do have certain privileges in certain aspects of our life. Those privileges might have been very invisible previously when the pandemic was not here, but it is now, I think it is high time that we acknowledge them and share them with the people who do not have them. And we must take an altruistic stand. I know that we have been instructed to keep physical distance with each other and maintain social distancing, but still I think we can still take an altruistic stand and be ready to think a little selflessly so that we can help others and we can combat this present situation together and make the situation comfortable for other people. And we have a very basic duty towards one another to keep our illness inside if there is any, so that no other individual further gets infected by me if I'm sick. And in the cases related to illness, no privileges on the basis of socio-economic status and social status should be provided. In the conclusion, I would like to say that we do not know what the new normal is going to be like and what the future is going to be like. But when the situation is unprecedented, the most important thing that matters, I think, how we choose to respond to them. So here, I think having a basic ethical guidelines would help us to respond to this current situation and handle it in a better way and make the situation a little better. Thank you so much. And in the end, I would like to share with you all something. I would like to share a list of materials that have really helped me to pen down the thoughts for today's presentation. How do I share a slide? Okay. I hope the slide is visible to everybody. Is it? Is the slide visible? Okay, these are the list of online materials that have really helped me to pen down my thoughts for today's presentation. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Set Anandram Jaipuria College, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Sanchita, for your nice and beautiful presentation. Undoubtedly, today we are enriched and enlightened to hear our speakers. And now we will start our interactive session, which will be conducted by Dr. Lama. So I'd like to request Dr. Lama to take over the interactive session. Over to Dr. Lama.
Thank you, Professor Chandrima Paul. I'm Dr. Lama. So, a panel of colleagues from the philosophy St. Anandram Jaipuria College have chosen a question each for Professor Bala and Professor Gua are the chief speakers of this web seminar. The first question would be for Professor Bala. Professor Bala, do you think that the term new normal gives rise to a sense of abnormality or negativity despite having the term normal in it? Professor Bala?
Yeah, thank you so much for that wonderful, nicely put
Thank
question.
you.
I don't think that this new normal is going to be a kind of abnormal in the sense that we have defined abnormal so far, okay? But definitely it is going to be a different kind of normal that we are referring to. So in that sense, sure, it is going to be above normal or abnormal that we have to redefine with. Having said that, what I was trying to hint at is this kind of uncertainty that into which we are, which is created by time and space, along with the unknowability of the unknown, okay, complete unknowability of completely an unknown kind of thing, which is creating a problem, or half knowing the unknown. That's what is creating the uncertainty. And this uncertainty definitely creates a kind of anxiety in each one of us and a kind of fear. And this kind of mental state makes us to probably opt more for philosophy, right? I would say philosophy is the one which provides solace to the individuals and the self. It pushes the individual to get into a kind of self-inquiry and self-reflectivity. And that is where I would say It should lead to alignment, realignment. Okay, once you start thinking about your own self and it's your conscient parts, then probably you would try to understand or realign yourself with the factual world that is around you, which is now completely a different kind of one now. It's not that the world has changed. The factual world remains the same, but the way you start interacting with it is the one which is completely changing, which means I'm reiterating once again, it is our ontology which is getting affected. It is neither the self nor the factual world are getting affected, but our ontology is getting affected. So when you think as a being in the world, is what requires reconceptualization. That's what I was referring to. So that's how I don't see it to be abnormal in the sense that we have understood it so far, but definitely it is going to be a new kind of.
It's a new way of looking at normal.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Bala, for clearing this doubt for us. Thank you so very much. Now, Professor Gua, now can I turn the question to you?
Yes, yes.
What kind of subjectivity being produced in such a metaphysics of science? How is this subjectivity produced? What are the different modes of subjection to the norms we must consider while critiquing this metaphysics of time? This was the question which I got. So,
Should I answer this first?
please do.
Okay. Can I ask a question in return so that I can understand the original question a little bit more? Why does the issue of subjectivity arise in this context? I would like to understand this a little bit more, because when I'm talking about how science can address a pandemic,
yes,
I am perhaps trying to consciously bracket out, subjective influences as far as possible, which does not, of course, mean that the scientist as a subject gets bracketed, but which definitely means that information that comes to a scientist working on a particular issue must not be such that it goes outside the replicability canon of science, for which subjectivity as subjectivity is not one of the major issues of concern for me at this point of time. But at the same time, I would like to reiterate that the scientist as a subject is important in this context. The scientist as a subject. And perhaps in the end of my talk, I have hinted that the scientist as a subject must look not only at the data that comes from outside, but also develop an inner understanding of the issue like a dedicated researcher. When a person is in research, he or she dedicates a large part of his or her life to that issue. And perhaps during a pandemic, every scientist, senior or junior, must turn into a little researcher. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Professor Gua. And Professor Bala and Professor Gua, thank you both for giving us such illuminating lectures. Now I hand it over to our compere, Professor Chandrima Paul. Thank you. Thank you once again.
I had actually received one more question from in the chat box. Is there any constraint of time?
Yes.
I think in
Hello?
the chat box, one more question had been raised for me. So if there is no constraint of time, I would like to respond to that question also.
Okay, once again, I'll have to ask Professor Javed about it. Javed, are you there? Javed, Professor Javed?
Sure, ma'am, please. Yes, please, ma'am, sure.
One more question. Can she ask?
Sure. Please answer.
Javed, your audio is very bad.
Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Hello.
Javed, we cannot hear you. Yes, now.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Very badly.
Yes, yes. Ma'am, please answer the question, ma'am.
Okay, sure.
So much. Thank
All right, Professor Gua, you may please carry on with your answer.
Yes,
Sure.
I think Shuddha Shattu Guhu Roy, he had asked me a question about how a philosopher can get back into the role of addressing such serious issues for which philosophers are usually not taken into account. You know, usually during a pandemic of this magnitude, philosophers are not the first people we think of. You know, we definitely think of the scientist and the specialist. So I think what was intended to ask is how philosophers or philosophy can come back to a position of being important enough to be asked how philosophy can help. In response, I want to just quote from the paper that I had mentioned. It's a very small quotation. It says, philosophy and science share the tools of logic, conceptual analysis, and rigorous argumentation. Yet, philosophers can operate these tools with degrees of thoroughness, freedom, and theoretical abstraction that practicing researchers in science often cannot afford in their daily activities. And during a crisis, I think this sort of dedicated focus is required, which a practicing scientist does not usually have in day-to-day life. You know, because for a practicing scientist, it's like, you know, running or eating without thinking too much. There are certain protocols which they keep following one after the other. But I think, you know, all this talk about following protocols has to slow down a little bit so that scientists can turn into researchers. That's where philosophy comes in. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Professor Gua. Thank you very much. And I was hurrying you out. Thank you for giving an answer to such a lovely question. Thank you very much. Okay, Professor Chandrima Paul, are you there?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now it's over to you. You can carry on. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Now I'd like to request our convener, Dr. Professor Javed Hashan, for valedictory speech.
Thank you, Professor Paul. Well, we have come to the end of the session, end of the webinar. Now this is time to sum up the session, to think about what we have learned through the session, very briefly. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to Professor Bala for giving a wonderful, thought-provoking idea of different perception of normality. That is what he called new normal. And we understood the future of our life, uncertainty of our life as well. Thanks again, sir. We really enriched from your talk. Thank you. Secondly, I express my heartfelt gratitude to my teacher, my ma'am, Professor Guha, for her extremely illuminating and enlightening speech, which is informative too. She explores so many things in her presentation. We have learned from her speech that there is a gap between scientific theory and practice, and that is a big issue for combating these viral threats. So we have to more concerned. We have to more careful to minimize that gaps. And also she spoke about meta-philosophical approach to this sort of crisis which we are going through, which is extremely enriched us, ma'am. So once again, I thank you very much. Now I come to our core participant, those who are presented their papers in this webinar, national webinar. I must give a big thanks to them also. First, Dr. Nilina Ghosh, Associate Professor of Philosophy. She presented her paper entitled The Pandemic and Ethical and Moral Approach, which is very, very beautiful presentation as far as I understand. Next, there was a presentation by Professor Lohori Bandopadhyay. Her speak was on the logical insight of Mahasukha, recalling the central thoughts of Buddhism in this pandemic era. So from the perspective of Indian philosophy, she has explored very nicely regarding these crucial issues and crises. Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker was Professor Koel Kole. She spoke on the 4 noble truths in combating COVID-19 for human existence. So she explored from the Buddhist perspective, and she nicely presented her paper in this session. So I must thank to her. And finally, the last but not the least, research scholar Ms. Sanchayita Sen, Jadavpur University Philosophy Department. She has also nicely presented her paper on morals for dealing with viral threats. So these are the 4 paper presenters who are very, very nicely presented their paper. We have enriched indeed. Thank you all. And once again, I must thanks to our honorable invited speakers, those who have given their valuable time for us. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Over
Thank
to
you, Dr. Javed. Thank you.
Over to Professor Paul.
Thank you so much, sir. And I think, not only I think, I'm quite sure that this seminar has become adorable and appreciable to all of us. And now we have already reached to our concluding part of this webinar. So I'd like to request Professor Shukanto Sarkar to conclude our today's webinar with vote of thanks. Over to Professor Sarkar.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. A very good evening to all. It gives me an immense pleasure to propose the vote of thanks for this webinar to dignitaries assembled here. I would like to propose a hearty vote of thanks our distinguished speakers, Professor Balaganapati Devarakonda, for gracing today's webinar. Thank you, sir, for your very interesting and thought-provoking address. And now, I would like to extend very hearty vote of thanks to our respected speaker, Professor Mousumi Guha, for making excellent presentation and making this webinar interesting and meaningful. And also, I would like to express vote of thanks to our 4 paper presenters for their wonderful presentations. Now, I would like to express our profound gratitude to Principal Dr. Ashok Mukhopadhyay for moral support and guidance for success of the web seminar. And also, I would like to propose a very hearty vote of thanks to our academic in charge, Professor Rekha Singh, for her moral support and friendly guidance. Now I am happy to express vote of thanks to our beloved HOD, Professor Surojit Borua, and also we would like to vote of thanks to IQAC coordinator, Dr. Radhanath Pain sir, and also Professor Nilashish Pal, Professor Gargi Basu, Professor Devraj Roy, and all team member of IQAC for their hard work and kind cooperation. Also like to vote of thanks non-teaching staff of our college for their unconditional efforts and cooperation. Now, thanks all people who have participated overwhelmingly and making the webinar great success. Last but not the least, we would like to thank all the students who students of our college who have attended the web seminar so enthusiastically. And make success the web seminar. Once again, thanks all for your cordial cooperation. Thank you. Over to you, Chanjima.
Thank you everyone for making a webinar a grand